It's a great pleasure to be here. On a day when the election results in France and Greece call attention to a changing popular mood, at least in some parts of the world, after 4 years of an unresolved economic crisis. I'm certainly very pleased to be here at MIT to talk about a book that studies some of the issues that I think are relevant to the onset of the events with which we've been faced in recent years. And it's certainly a pleasure to be back in Cambridge, which, as many of you know, is my hometown. The study of economic inequality has been a coming thing in economics only for the last decade and a half or so. It was a backwater for many years following the end of World War II, for the first half of the post-war period, and only began to catch the interest of the economics profession in the 1980s, when it became clear that things were changing, that there were developments of interest, that in particular respects, inequality, especially in the United States, was getting worse. Over the years since, and particularly in the 1990s, there developed a dominant narrative on this subject, in which the classical economic notions of supply and demand tended to predominate. That is to say, there developed in the literature an explanation of inequality that was based upon technology and the demand for skill, education and the supply of skill, immigration and trade and the supply of unskilled labor, contending forces operating in the labor market, but operating in ways that economists understood to be substantially microeconomic, market-driven in character. This suggested that the environment in which these forces were operating was substantially self-contained labor markets, which might be linked to each other, but only by the kinds of channels I just described, by the diffusion of technology, by the migration of workers, by trade in goods with differing compositions in the labor that puts them together. If you went to the Journal of Economic Literature, and in fact, if you go there today and ask how you would be able to classify an article on macroeconomics and inequality, you'd find there's no such classification. That, in fact, the profession is simply not oriented to thinking about the problem of inequality in those terms. This is something I have been engaged in trying to change for quite a long time. I did a book called Created Unequal, Crisis in American Pay, in 1998, which reviewed this literature, particularly focusing on the United States, and came to the conclusion that the narrative framework was not adequate to describe what was actually happening, and that one needed to have a much clearer picture of how inequality, movement of inequality, fit into the ongoing evolution of economic conditions. This book, Inequality and Instability, extends that work to the world at large.